Hello, this is Jen McKee, and we are going to be continuing with our Wheelchair Skills Online Training course, Module 1, Part 2. Just to review, in Part 1, we covered the skills of rolling forwards, rolling backwards, and stopping. And in Part 2, we are going to be discussing turning, getting through doors, and getting over soft surfaces or uneven surfaces. There are a lot of different ways to practice turns and a lot of different types of turns that we can do in a wheelchair. Zigzagging or turning while moving forwards is probably something that you do a lot of, even just to get around the house. And it's easy to practice and really get comfortable with the skill and used to all of the different components of the skill by using 3 to 5 cones, pillows, or toys spaced about 1 to 2.5 meters apart in a straight line. The farther these objects are spaced apart, the easier it'll be in the turning component, and the closer they are together, the more challenging it will be to turn around them. So while we're moving forwards and turning, you'll probably notice that your outside hand has to push harder on the hand rim than the inside hand. The inside hand will be applying pressure to the wheel to slow that wheel down. And depending on how sharp the turn is, that difference of big push versus a lot of pressure might be pretty drastic. Another thing you might notice when you turn while moving forwards is that leaning your body into the turn can really help achieve a more efficient turn, so it can make that turn easier. So we can see I didn't have any cones available to me, unfortunately, when we filmed this, but if you imagine they were set up in a straight line about 1.5 meters apart, and I'm weaving in between these cones like a serpentine. You can see my outside hand is going to be pushing much harder, my inside hand is going to be slowing the wheel down, and my body is going to be slightly leaning into the turn. Now if you look at that from the side, this, I have to admit, was not super easy for me. The surface that I was on was sloped and it was a little bit uneven. So the surface that you practice this on will also make a difference to how challenging the skill is. But I'm just going around the different lines in the parking lot, and again, you can see how my hands are moving at a different pace. As we go backwards, please remember all of the safety tips that we learned in Part 1 about where your body weight is in the chair, being aware of your surroundings, and practicing slowly before picking up the speed. So don't forget, when we're moving backwards, we want to lean our body forwards to prevent a backwards tip. We want to look over both of our shoulders to be aware of our environment. And if we practice without a back anti-tipper, it's really important to make sure that a spotter is present to grab the push handles or the wheelchair frame in order to prevent a backwards fall. And accuracy before speed, this can be a very challenging skill. And so practice slowly first. Keep those cones or toys or pillows spaced a little bit farther apart to give you an opportunity to anticipate that turn and to really think about where your hands are going to be and really be able to take the time to scan your environment and look over your shoulders while you're trying to set up your body for the skill. Once you become more comfortable, practice a little bit quicker, and then move the objects closer together. Again, slow down until you're comfortable moving through that tighter turn, and then once you are, you can pick up the speed again. So here you can see from the side, I am looking over both of my shoulders as I turn. My body weight is leaned slightly forwards. My outside hand is pushing hard. My inside hand is holding the wheel. Notice that my hands stay on the wheel the entire time. Another one of our safety checks. And I'm doing some pretty tight turns here. If you imagine I was going through cones. And I think the view from the back gives you a little bit of a better picture of how my body is leaning into the turn. So here you can see my body is starting to lean into the turn as I push harder with the outside hand and I hold the wheel with the inside hand. So figure 8 is another great way to practice turns. And you can use, again, just 2 cones, pillows, or toys spaced a couple meters apart. The closer together they are, the more challenging it will be. And the closest that they can be to each other would be just close enough for the wheelchair to fit through them, and that would be a really tight figure 8. You can make them pretty far apart if you want to practice moving forwards and then turning. And you can do this go forwards and backwards. So here I'm going to demonstrate. It takes a pretty big push to get all the way around those objects. And the smaller the object is, if you try to stay as close to it as possible, that's going to make it more challenging. So notice I'm not doing a really big, I'm not really looping out really far around the chair. I'm trying to stay really nice and close to the chair. And that helps me with my control, with my environmental awareness, and it helps make the skill a little bit more challenging. So turning tight, or a 180-degree turn. This is when we're trying to turn around and face the opposite direction. And to do this, we're going to pull one wheel backwards while pushing the other wheel forwards at the same time. And we might have to do this pretty forcefully to get a complete turn. I'm a pretty visual person. I like to see what I'm doing and be able to track my progress. So I find it very valuable to do this when I'm on a line or at the intersection of 2 lines, like on a cross. The goal is to see if you can turn and face the opposite direction with one push, but that might be challenging at first when you're getting a feel for where your hands are on the wheels and how much force you have to push through. Remember, accuracy before speed is okay if it takes 3, 4, or 5 pushes to get yourself all the way facing the opposite direction. As you start to build momentum, speed, and force, that will become easier for you and you'll be able to do it in fewer pushes. So here you can see I am on this line in the parking lot. My right hand is pulling backwards while my left hand is pushing forwards. And then the opposite is true as I come around the other direction. I'll show that one more time. A nice tight turn in a tight spot. I'm trying to stay on the same place in the line when I turn both directions. So there are 2 different things that can affect the turning radius, or your ability to turn in a space. The turning circle is affected by the parts that stick out above the ground, like your foot support or your feet, or even your hands on the hand rims. The turning circle will be smaller in a hallway than in an open room, or in a space like in this picture here. If this sink did not have a space underneath it for his feet, then as he turns around, there might be room for the wheels on the floor, but his feet are going to limit his ability to turn because they're going to hit the bottom of the sink. The turning footprint, on the other hand, is affected by the parts that touch the ground, so the front caster wheels and the rear wheels. This can be an example of this might be a sidewalk or a platform where the surface that the wheels touch might be small, and that can affect how much you can turn. So, for example, if this circle that this man is on, if we shrunk that circle so it's only touching the back wheels and the front caster, then he would have a very small turning footprint to turn his wheelchair around. So one way to practice this is called the line game. It's a game that I played a lot as a kid when we had access to a sport field or sport court. And for this game, players will propel or walk along the lines on a court, and you can do this if you have access to a space, or you can do this by taping or using chalk to draw lines. When players meet each other, it can be fun with 3, 4, 5, as many players as you can get. when players meet each other on the line, they're going to turn around and go the opposite direction. So they were practicing our 180-degree turn, and we're trying to stay on the line. You can make this fun in any way that you want. You can give each other high fives, you can wave at each other, you can tell each other a joke, ask each other questions, and you can make it more challenging by adding rules. So for example, instead of turning around and going the opposite direction when you meet another player, maybe you have to go backwards until you find another line to move forwards on. Another way to practice is to dance. Dancing is one of my favorite things to do, and I have 3 videos here that I'd like to show you. This first one is from a dance class with young children. We'll just zoom forwards here. So you can really play around with moving your arms, shifting your body, turning in any direction you want to. If you have a partner, you can dance with a partner, you can dance by yourself. If you have any types of ribbons or string, using those can be a lot of fun when we're dancing. Pick a song that you really like. Here's another example of a group dance. And then finally, we have our professional dancers. I could watch that all day. If you feel like you need any inspiration for dance moves or any particular dances that you want to learn, YouTube has a ton. But really the beautiful thing is that you cannot dance wrong. Any type of movement that you have is going to be beautiful and wonderful and a great chance to express yourself. And just as a bonus is an opportunity to practice wheelchair skills such as turns. So our next skill is getting through doors. Doors can be really challenging, especially closing doors. So one tip to consider for home is to use a rope or a handle in the middle of the door that you can kind of attach on there somehow, and that might make it a little bit easier to close behind. One note is that our foot supports can be really valuable in helping us open doors, especially a weighted door that closes on its own. But foot supports should not be used to open or close glass doors that might break. So just as a safety check, we want to make sure we're limiting the time that we have to place fingers between the door and the door frame. This is especially important with weighted doors because we might be distracted with trying to get through or with where our wheelchair, where our body is, and the door might close on our fingers without us even realizing it. We also want to be aware of our feet, especially if they stick out over the foot support. We want to really protect those toes, and a lot of people who have limited sensation, or maybe they don't have a whole lot of feeling in their feet or in their legs, it can be really risky for injury, for developing injuries if they have their feet sticking out when they're going through a door. So opening a door away from you, here's a video. I think this one is a little bit easier than opening a door towards you. So I'm approaching the door, I'm going to open it, wheel through, turn around, and close it behind me. So if this was a weighted door, I might use the door frame with my opposite hand to help leverage myself. I'd push the door open, and then I would get my front casters through the door. That would be the first thing I want to do. That way when the door comes back to close, I have it propped open and I'm stopping it from closing with the front casters. And then I'd go all the way through and the door would close behind me. Opening a door towards you can definitely be more challenging. Of course, the weight of the door, the size of the door, and where the door is located is going to affect how challenging this is. So some strategies for closing the door behind you after you've gone through. There are a number of different ways to achieve this. The length of your arms can definitely determine which strategy is the best for you. But try a couple of these. Don't give up if you're not successful the first couple of times. It might just be the position of the chair or trying to rearrange where your body is and the orientation relative to the door. That could really be the key. So one way that you can close the door behind you is by reaching backwards over the wheelchair once you're already through. And of course, when we're reaching backwards, we want to be cognizant of not tipping backwards. We can also gently swing the door closed behind as we move the wheelchair through the door. So at the same time, which is what I'm demonstrating in the video that I'll show in just a moment. Two strategies that might be more effective for children who don't have the arm length or haven't quite developed the skill of maneuvering the wheelchair might be to turn around once they're already through the door and then reach forward to pull the door closed. And this is when having that rope or handle in the middle of the door could be really beneficial. And another option that some people prefer is to open the door, do that 180-degree turn to face the opposite direction, and then reverse the wheelchair through the door as they pull the door handle closed. So here in this video, I'm demonstrating how I like to get through doors. So I open it towards me, and then as I go through, I'm just going to pull the handle with me. If this were a weighted door, then again, I might use the door frame with my opposite hand. So I'll have the door handle with one hand, the door frame with the opposite. And once the door is open, I'm going to try to maneuver my front casters into the door to prevent it from closing on me. And then I can reach my hands forward and I can either grab both sides of the door frame and kind of push myself through, slingshot myself through the door. That's how I prefer to get through, but there are some other strategies if you have a weighted door to practice with. It's just good to try as many strategies as you can. I think it takes a lot of attempts to successfully find the strategy that works for you. So our next skill will be going over soft surfaces or uneven surfaces like grass or carpet, which can be really challenging to navigate in a wheelchair independently for somebody who isn't quite used to where their body weight is in the chair. And the important thing is to shift your body so the front caster wheels do not get stuck. If they have too much weight on them, because they're so small, it's easy for them to get stuck or to really sink in to whatever surface you're on top of. It's really important to be mindful of forward tips if our body weight is forward, because when those front casters get stuck, it can stop the wheelchair, and the momentum, depending on how fast we're going or how forceful we come to a stop, we might have a forward tip. So again, just to go back, just like when we're moving backwards, we want our body to be slightly forwards, and play around with where your body weight is in the chair. Practice shifting your weight and get used to feeling how shifting your weight forwards and backwards makes it more or less challenging to push yourself when you're on different surfaces. So leaning forwards, it might feel like leaning forwards helps you push stronger and harder. However, we know that that puts more weight on the front casters. So it really is about finding the right balance for you of leaning forwards and leaning backwards. So in this video, we'll see Charlie. She's going to start by leaning forwards, which is going to be harder because the front casters are going to be sinking into the grass. And then halfway through, we'll see Charlie switch to sitting more upright, which is going to be easier to get across the grass because the front casters will kind of glide along the grass, but it still is a lot of work. So here we can see Charlie start by leaning forwards, and those front wheels here are really, there's a lot of weight on them, and so they're sinking into the grass, making it difficult. As Charlie comes into a more upright position, the front casters can kind of float over the grass, and here Charlie's telling me that her arms are getting tired. So another way to get over soft surfaces or uneven surfaces is in a wheelie position. That way you don't have to worry about the front casters at all. This is really the best way to help somebody over the grass or over gravel, over a rocky ground, over sand even, is really to help them tip back into a wheelie position, and then to keep them in that wheelie position as you push them forwards. It can also be helpful to go backwards. Sometimes people find that it's easier to assist somebody moving backwards in the wheelie position than pushing forwards. It's really important to remember that the person in the wheelchair should be relaxed back into the back support when they're being assisted to help take the strain off of the person assisting. It can be a lot more work for the person who's helping keep that person into a wheelie position. It can be a lot more work if the person in the wheelchair is leaning forwards with their body weight. And safety always. If you remember in part 1, we talked about keeping your hands on the wheels at all times. Even when you're being assisted, it's important to keep your hands on the wheels because we want the person in the wheelchair to have control. We really want to start to emphasize those positive habits, those good habits early on. And keeping your hands on the wheels is one of those good habits that is really important. So we'll practice wheelies in a later module, so don't worry about it right now. This is something that you definitely need those back anti-tippers to be flipped up or removed. And also if you're assisting somebody to get over a soft surface, it can be a lot easier to assist them if the anti-tippers are not in the way. So you might flip the anti-tippers up, just stick it over the softer uneven surface, and then put them back down when you're ready to roll on a more even surface. So here we see Charlie again. This time she is going over the grass in a wheelie, and it's much easier. She's moving quicker, and she has really good control. This is a skill that she's practiced. Caster pops are another really great skill and can make it easier to get over soft surfaces. Transient caster pops are when we lift the front casters with a push and let them rest on the ground during the recovery phase. This is something that I see a lot of kids doing just naturally when they're going forwards and they haven't quite felt the way that their body feels in the chair. Caster pops are what you see when a kid will pop a wheelie and kind of balance or touch those anti-tippers on the ground and then come back forwards really quickly. So I think a lot of kids do this intuitively, and it's really nice to hone in on the control of the skill and to really understand why we're doing it, when it's beneficial, and how we can utilize it for more advanced skills. So this is something that we're going to come back to in later modules. I just want to demonstrate how it might look on soft surfaces. So I'd like you to start by practicing on a firm surface. Like I said, it's probably something that you've done before. And as I push, very simply, I'm pushing, my front wheels come up, so my body weight is going to be leaning back. And as I come down to the recovery phase, my front wheels are going to return to the ground. As always, if we're doing this without the anti-tippers, like these are my anti-tippers on this wheelchair. They're flipped up. So if I was practicing this for the first time, or if I was not used to doing a wheelie position, I'd want somebody to be behind me with their hands on the wheelchair frame to make sure there was no backwards tip. As we practice on the grass or soft surfaces, you can see I'm pushing, my front wheels lift, and as I recover and bring my hands back to that start position, my front wheels are on the grass. If I was moving really quickly and I had a very forceful stop with where those front casters came down, that's when I want to be cognizant and aware of the potential for a forward tip. So again, just be aware of where your body weight is in the chair. Maybe practice this skill a few times, and we're going to be using caster pops to build on more advanced skills later on. So that's it for Module 1. We'll continue to build on all of these skills in Module 2, so please keep practicing. If you remember that red light, green light game that we played in Part 1, you can start using all of these skills in that game as well. So you can start to add rules and make it more challenging. Maybe when the traffic light calls out red light, maybe all the players have to turn around and face the opposite direction before they freeze. Or maybe they have to do caster pops when they push forwards. There are a lot of different ways you can be creative with these games. If you're looking for a new game to play on your phone, I know a lot of us are spending more screen time than we might be used to, and we might be looking for new ways to stay engaged. There's an app, a game that is available called Extreme Wheelchairing. It's available from Google Play and the App Store. I just downloaded it for the first time this week, and it was pretty challenging for me. I got through the first 2 levels, but it's a game where you push the wheelchair forwards with your thumbs, and it has different obstacles and different levels, and I thought it was a pretty great representation. You don't see a whole lot of representation for people with physical disabilities, and I think it can be maybe just a nice game to try out. Let me know what you think if you do give it a shot. So thank you again for joining me with this module, and we will continue on in Module 2 with more advanced skills.